We are in the Cavelli Center today for Ross Bjork's introduction as Ohio State's new athletic director. I'm Nathan Baird from cleveland.com along with Andrew Gillis and Stephen Means. But everybody's minds were back at Ohio Stadium and the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. There was a lot of talk today about football. Ross Bjork on his own saying football is king and making that known that he understands the priority here as far as I think the collective mind of the fan base, but also the importance to the athletic program. And football is at a interesting juncture, obviously. 3 straight losses to Michigan, missing the playoff, but about to go into a new Big Ten, about to go into a new college football playoff format. So a lot of change happening, but a lot of the direction of the program may be riding on what happens in the coming 8 to 12 months. Stephen, as you look at the things that Ross Bjork was saying today, what do you feel like the immediate influence on football is going to be?
All positive. I thought he did his best job of making sure Ryan Day knew that he was his guy. And Ryan Day was here at the press conference sitting in that red jacket that he always wears in these types of environments. And he was joking with him at times. And, this is our guy, football mind, all the football stuff that people typically say in those situations. But he said it's going to be real fun when we start winning those champs. All the positive things about Ryan Day. And then some of the stuff he was talking about with NIL, things where it feels like with the Ohio State football program, if you feel like NIL isn't what it should be, especially on the recruiting front, you can take what Ross Bjork was saying today as there's going to be some attempts to try to, improve things, even if things are already improving, but taking those next steps. Whether it works or not, we'll see. But I thought today was, if I'm Ryan Day, I loved what I heard from Ross Bjork in terms of, one, I know that this guy is like full in on me being the head coach here, and he's full in on what we have done for the first 5 years here. And as he said, I'm here to help. I'm here to help and advance. And if I'm, like I said, if I'm Ryan Day and if I'm a fan of this program, and if I'm maybe not sure about Ryan Day, that's what I needed to hear from Ross Bjork today.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming from a place where, as you said a couple of times, the culture is very different. The booster pressure, the pressure that people think kind of exists at Ohio State, definitely exists at a place like Texas A&M, definitely existed at a place like Ole Miss. And I tried to ask him a question today that kind of got to the heart of, maybe are you looking forward to coming to a place where that's not quite as insane? Like you can have all the an even better infrastructure, but in an environment with a better perspective on things, a healthier perspective on things, where then the athletic director gets to maybe run things without having that interference that you have sort of putting up with willfully because you need it for financial reasons. But as it relates to NIL especially, that was an area where 2 years ago Ohio State was frustrated. I think Ohio State coaches were frustrated because they saw other teams such as Texas A&M supposedly, and Ross Bjork pushed back on my interpretation of this, but like the perception was that teams like Texas A&M were able to spend a lot of money, and Ohio State was, because of the strictures of the athletic department policies, were not doing that. And I think Ryan Day would probably say, well, the answer needs to be somewhere in between, and I think that Ross Bjork is the guy that probably maybe has enough of both perspectives to help that happen.
Yeah, so when you talk about these kind of settings, there's always a little bit of politicking going on. You're never going to say what you really think. You're never going to give the full answer. I think, but the good news for Ohio State coaches and for fans that kind of want more out of the NIL program, he said this in relation to another answer. The buck stops with him. He was talking about the Ole Miss situation with Hugh Freeze, where there was the off-the-field stuff, there was the recruiting violations. I believe they had to not forfeit, but they had to forego like 33 wins after the fact. You have the Jimbo Fisher contract, and he mentioned look, this is a group thing. This is a group collaborative effort. It's not just the AD. There's a lot that goes into these things. But eventually the buck does stop with me. Well, it's the same thing with some NIL stuff that's going on at Texas A&M, because it's not Ross Bjork leading this, right? Like, I want people to be clear about this. Like, Ross Bjork is not going into high schoolers' homes and writing NIL contracts and handing it to them. That's not what it is. But he's overseeing it, right? If you're going to give him kind of credit for the NIL stuff or credit for the Texas A&M or Ole Miss, or negatives for the Texas A&M or Ole Miss, you got to give him the positives or the negatives from the NIL thing, because it is a collaborative effort. So as Steven and I were talking about kind of off camera, I think the expectation is going to be obviously the same, but the excuses are going to be gone, because I think this is a program now where, we mentioned in another video, they're going to be very aggressive in how they approach football and how they approach just generally the athletic department as a whole. and the excuses are going to be gone. I think this is a program that's going to be able to get anything you want. He was asked about renovations. He's obviously not going to answer that. He just got here. He was asked about renovations to facilities and all those other things. But this kind of feels like a situation where the NIL program is going to get up and running. He mentioned a culture of NIL program, not just, hey, we're going to have a bunch of people throwing a bunch of money around. You want to have the culture right with the coaches and with the leaders of the organization. And I think this is going to be a time where you're kind of out of excuses for, a couple of years down the line if you're Ohio State football.
Again, on a lot of these topics, I don't feel like it's going to be 180 degrees from where Gene Smith was. I mean, Gene Smith, I think, was a very supportive athletic director, in terms of supporting football. I think NIL and these progressive things that are coming into the sport were maybe the one area where he was just legitimately uncomfortable with some things as to how it relates to the structure of college football going forward. But some of those things are changing whether he likes it or not, and it seems from the things that Ross Bjork was saying today that he is maybe a step beyond accepting some of those things and is ready to position Ohio State to be not having to catch up to them the next time around, to maybe be the leader out in front and helping shape some of these things. And I think it affects football more than anything else. So I agree. I think if you're Ryan Day today, I think you heard a lot of the right things. And by the way, people, if we're talking about NIL and how we can enhance NIL, well, Ohio State's NIL was good enough to keep almost all the guys who were going off to the NFL, plus bring in some pretty impactful transfers. And there's some, believe who you want to believe as to how much NIL was playing into each of those deals, but it's a factor, and they were able to have a very successful last couple of weeks, despite whatever people think of any shortcomings there. So I think the foundation is here in football, and it's just a matter of he came from a place where no matter how much they spent, no matter how many resources they threw at football, they couldn't get over the hump. And I think he sees at Ohio State a place where the floor is much higher, and he just has to help push it across. And that's what I think everybody involved with that football program is trying to do right now. Much more discussion about this on Buckeye Talk. Get it wherever you can find podcasts, and get the text 614-350-3315 news, analysis, updates all year long from cleveland.com.